And now I just need to finish setting up my timer. You didn't see that. You didn't see me put on my headphones on as though I'm about ready to start doing LP videos. Hello and welcome back to Max Plays Final Fantasy IX. Didn't we finish that game like a month ago? Heck no! Welcome back to Max Grinds. Chocobo hot and cold to fight Ozma. Let's not. Anyhow, hello there friend. Welcome back to Max Answers Writing Advice Questions. Writing Advice Q&A. In today's episode, we have a little bit of a really interesting bag of questions, all picked thanks to the random number generator and sent by you. But before we go anywhere, allow me to give you the formal disclaimer and remind you, as always, that the following is merely just my advice, my opinion, and what works for me. Don't take it as gospel, instead take it as the ramblings of a silly person who looks a little bit, or rather precisely, like this. Freeze frame, silly face, trademark, Kirin. And actually, one more thing before I begin, I want to let you know that if you have questions of your own you would like me to answer, leave them in the comments down below and I'll add them to the writing advice answer pile of questions. They're all picked randomly, so your question is as likely to get an answer as anybody else's. But with that being said, let's take it from the top. I've got my timer. I'm prepared mentally to answer your writing advice questions. And the first question sounds a little bit like this. Hey Max, I was wondering what's your opinion on referencing pop culture in books? I actually answered this on YouTube because it was a really quick question, but I also wanted to answer it here because I think it's a really good question, so I'll cover it really quickly. Or as soon as I stop messing with my hair, question mark. Timer, start! My stand on pop culture in writing is kind of a stern one. Remember, of course, that my writing advice is just that, you don't take what I say as gospel, it's just how I feel about things. And I personally feel that pop culture references in writing can be a little bit problematic, not only because they date your book, but also because you have no control over the way that the pop culture is going to change in the future. And the worst thing of all is that since you don't have control over the way that the pop culture changes, you can have situations where you reference that one of your characters, somehow loves or is really entertained by this one particular actor, and then next thing you know, in 6 months that actor comes out as being a homophobe or a really, really, really unpleasant person, and suddenly, this book that you wrote that is basically going off to the presses has your character being, you know what, I love Chuck Norris. You know what, I love Bill Cosby. He's my favorite comedian. It can become really problematic. You don't have control over any of those things. And that's why I personally think that you should stay away from using pop culture references. You can use them if you want, but keep in mind that what is cool right now may probably not be cool in 6 months or in a year or whenever this book sees publication. It can be a little problematic. Unless if you're doing stuff that is really current and it's coming out right now, it may probably not be as much of a problem. It's still gonna be dated though. Imagine if your character in your teenage coming of age stories references Catterday or makes 4chan jokes. That feels dated already. And that was those jokes were hip back when I was in high school. So the pop culture changes, and I would honestly recommend you to not use pop culture references because they date your book and you have no control over how things are gonna change. It can just be really problematic. I've always been of the mindset of creating my own references and creating my own products and stuff, not only because it gives me full control over how things develop, but it also makes your world feel a lot more alive and a lot more like it's its own thing. So really quickly, what's my opinion on pop culture references in books? Stay away from them, because you don't know how things are gonna change. Oh man, I was thinking about the worst case scenario, and I was thinking of a situation where a character wants to grow up to be a good dad, and it's I just want to grow up to be like Bill Cosby, and I'm like, if you only had known what the future had in store. Whew, doesn't it feel good to be in the future? Right now, Max said, recording a video that will become part of the past. Man, the future goes by so quickly. It just passed. Where's my knee? Anyhow, Next question goes a little bit like this. Max, I'm thinking of restarting the story I'm writing, remaking the characters and the plot, but in a similar universe because I feel the story won't go anywhere, or anywhere I want it to, rather. What are your thoughts? I have one issue with the situation that you're posing. By the way, bonus points for saying that you want to restart it, not because the story won't go anywhere, but for actually displacing your own feelings and admitting, I don't want the story to go this way. That is totally cool by my books. Bonus points for disarming your own feelings and actually analyzing how you actually feel. That is awesome. As for the actual question, I want to remind you that plot is not a thing that exists. People keep giving plot like it's the most important thing in writing, and I don't think it is. To me, the most and biggest important thing in the story is character. Plot is the byproduct of characters making choices and taking action. That is what I call the Marcy rule after my totally awesome college professor who taught creative writing. Plot is the byproduct of characters taking actions and making choices. Remember that. And for me, I've said this in the past and I'm going to say it again, settings are pretty cool and interesting, but honestly, if I don't care about the characters, then I don't care about the setting. So this situation is a little silly because I wouldn't do that. I don't think any universe is cool enough that I would displace my characters from it. Of course, you're a different person with your own writing and your own lifestyle. Who am I to tell you what to do? My one caveat is this. I think it's cool. I think you can do it. I think, because, if that's what you want to do, then go out and do it. Seek your own way, fellow writer. Find your own way to make things work just for you. That being said, keep in mind that this is a little bit of a slippery slope because this thing that you're saying, you could literally spend years doing this. You could spend years coming up with an idea, trying to write it, realizing it doesn't go the way you want it to go with immediately, and start again and again and again and again and again. You can do this. You can do this for the rest of your life. You could. That's why I would recommend you, if you haven't already, check out my guide for how to plan a novel. It will help you create the foundations of your story exactly what you want. So you don't have to gamble and hope maybe the story goes where you want it to. No, your story is going to be exactly about what you want it to. Simple and easy. That solves one of the problems. People ask me, Max, you sure like to pimp your guide for how to plan a novel? Well, yeah, because I developed it to answer all of these questions. But anyhow, you can check it out. It's on my channel. It should be on the main page. Anyhow, if you think that you can do this without falling into that spiral of just never finishing stories, then I'm all with you. People forget, and that's my answer for this question, just as a last little epilogue to this question. People forget that writing is a very time-consuming and long process, and people think that it's selfish to write what you want to, and I'm here as the one person in the universe who's going to tell you that that is not true at all. It's your work, it's your time, your dedication. Make it whatever you want it to, okay? Just make sure to finish stuff, okay? I mentioned that I actually already answered one of those questions previously, so I'm actually going to have an extra question today, okay? And also this upcoming question is actually really quick. It goes a little bit like this. What are your thoughts on writing by hand versus writing on the keyboard? Timer. Reduced and start. I have nothing against writing by hand versus writing on the keyboard. I think writing by hand can be pretty cool and interesting. It gives you a really tactile feeling. In my personal experience and in the way that I do things, I've been writing books for a long time, and part of my creative writing process has become developing faster, more efficient ways of doing things. That's why, I save things on Evernote. That's why I use programs like Focuswriter. It's because I wanted to make the process the most efficient possible. And for me, writing by hand is really time consuming, and for me, there's just no way I would write a book by hand versus writing on a keyboard. It's just writing on the keyboard is just so much more faster and effective for what I want to achieve. Do I think there's anything wrong to writing by hand? Absolutely not. Everyone is a different writer, and everyone can go about creating their own creative writing process. I still do writing by hand. I mean, I have some awesome notebooks. Yeah, is that Made Komida? Focus. I said focus. Yeah. Anyhow, with that segue out of the way, I still write by hand. I totally do. I like to use notes, and I like to use apps like Scannable to scan my handwritten notes and post them on Evernote immediately. That's all really cool stuff. But yeah, that's really how I feel about it. I think that writing on the keyboard is just faster for me. You can do it by hand if you want. I know really successful people who do everything by hand. It takes them a little longer, that's true, but to each their own, right? As they say, the goal of writing is to tell stories and share them with the world, so as long as you achieve that goal, nothing else matters, right? And as for the final question, I think this question, picked by the random number generator, mind you, fits perfectly into my schedule of rambling about English teachers. And it goes a little bit like this. I was wondering if you keep a goal in mind when you write. Like, is there a message you want to convey through your work? Take a deep breath for emphasis. Timer, start. First question. I was wondering if you keep a goal in mind when you write. Yes, I keep a goal in mind. To have fun and to finish things. I'm not being facetious. I'm not making fun of your question. When I sit down to write, I ask myself how to make things fun, how to make it the most enjoyable for me. Those are my two goals. Now you may be asking yourselves, that's not a theme. That's not some sort of value. My English teacher told me that when you sit down to write, you gotta have a theme, you gotta have some mood, and many other made-up words. As opposed to what? Not made-up words? I guess all words are made up, but these concepts that are kind of put into your head. How many minutes have I gone without recommending On Writing by Stephen King? Well, somebody has made the math in the comments below. On Writing by Stephen King is a great book because you see probably one of the most influential writers, not only in the horror medium, but in fiction in general, talk about writing. And I love him because he talks about this very same concept, the idea of theme and mood. And English teachers fill your head with the idea that writers, like the big writers that you read in school, began the story with themes. J.R.R. Tolkien sat down and decided to write a story about loss, or whatever English teachers tell you that story is about. Stephen King talks in his book that during the revision process, the most important thing he does, once the entire book is done, it's been sitting in a shelf for like weeks, he picks it up, he reads through it, and he makes notes. And in those notes, he analyzes, what is this story about? Looking at this story now, looking at it as though it's an alien thing that somebody else made weeks ago. Not me. I'm a different person now. This Max from the past wrote this. What is this story about? You analyze it, you centralize what you want to do, and then during the revision process, you bring those things into the foreground. You rewrite parts of the story to bring that even more so, to bring it into the forefront. Writing. Writing is the act of discovery. I keep saying this, but nobody believes me. I said I would shoot, but you didn't believe me. Wow, that is the one Ren and Stimpy quote you will ever hear me say on this channel. As opposed to other Ren and Stimpy quotes, I guess. Padre Toastman. Anyhow, writing is the act of discovery. Writing is the act of discovering this story that wouldn't have existed otherwise. If you hadn't put the time, if you hadn't sat down to write, this story would not exist. Acknowledge that. So, is there a message you want to convey in your work? No. I don't sit down to write thinking about that. I sit down to edit thinking about that, but in the act of writing, I focus on having fun. I focus on enjoying the process, and I focus on finishing things. As I've said in the past, writing books, finishing books, telling stories is a binary state. You either do it or you don't. You can spend all this time practicing and thinking and thinking about doing, but if you don't do and you don't finish, then all of that was for nothing. You have to finish stories to move forward, and I know that sounds really harsh, but seriously, I mean it. Go out there, write, tell stories, and have fun, okay? But this video has gone on way too long. I had an extra question in there to make up for stuff, and it took way too long. For the time being, though, I want to thank you for watching. Thank you for spending a little bit of your day with me. If you have questions of your own, please feel free to leave them down in the comments below. I would love to hear them, as well as hearing your counterpoints or your own particular points of view on the issues discussed today. For the time being, though, again, thank you for watching. Thank you for spending a little bit of your day with me, and I'll be seeing you on the next one. We talk about pop culture and we talk about how some things seem impossible. And part of the silliness about pop culture is that you don't know how it's gonna change and evolve, and then, before you know it, something that seemed ridiculous and outrageous happens, and that's why I think that you should stay away from using pop culture references in your writing, because you honestly don't know what could possibly happen next. Out in Smash!